I'll skip the title, but quickly introduce myself. So I'm the other Ed that Ed mentioned. I'm the Strategic Account Director at Millertech and also of Clear Course Membership Services. So sort of my remit is working with clients on a day-to-day basis to talk about progression of their systems. So some of you will be looking at new systems, but I'm sort of more involved post-implementation, ongoing client relationships. So I get into the nuts and bolts talking to customers about how do we improve engagement, and that's what we will talk to you about today. And then I'm joined by Steve, who's our commercial head of product. So in a similar vein, working with our clients to understand the needs of where does our product need to go, what do we need to be thinking about, what are the trends. These sorts of sessions are really useful, and any feedback from you guys is really useful because we take that on board. So the plan for today's session, it's short and sweet. Steve and I have done a few webinars with MemberWise recently on the topic of engagement, specifically about how we improve strategies around retaining members, how we do proactive engagement versus reactive engagement. So if you've joined some of those sessions, your faces may be familiar. But for today, we wanted to talk about engagement in the vein of integration, and sort of how do you manage that engagement journey across different systems, different communication channels. So sort of very loose agenda. We're going to talk about some common barriers that we see. Steve's going to give you some considerations, some practical examples that we see, some recommendations, and hopefully you'll be able to take some stuff away from this and start applying that to your thinking, particularly for that phase where you're looking at other systems, other opportunities that are out there in the market. And then Q&A at the end. So if you've got any questions, put them in the app or raise them at the end. It's not a problem. So just as a starting point, I think a lot of us know this, but engagement's a hot topic. Sometimes it's hard to define what is engagement. It sort of varies as you speak to different people about it. But I think we all appreciate in membership especially that good engagement drives retention of your members, keeping members, and it also drives acquisition of new members. And really for membership, those are the two things that you should be really caring about on a day-to-day basis. And in the MemberWise Digital Excellence Report that came out last year, losing track of time, 2021, it was in the top. Again, I think for the last 3 years in a row, it's been number one sort of priority for membership organisations is member engagement. And I've just mentioned those two, acquisition and retention, but for me personally, those all sort of roll up into each other. And we called out a quote here is that members have expectations now. They expect personalisation, they expect it to be interactive, and this is all about this engagement piece, which then lends to different services that you're engaging with your customers with. So I mentioned common barriers, so I've got 6 on this slide at the moment. These are also informed by the MemberWise report as well, but in relation to engagement and challenges that we currently see. So things like the ability to measure it is a challenge. I've talked to a lot of clients that have systems in different silos, as we'll come on to, and how do we get that all in one place. Challenges generally around integration, they can both be technical, like actual limitations, cost limitations of how do we do this, how do we fund this integration. The ability to have personalisation is still a bit of a challenge. How do we do that? How do we do that effectively so it comes across and it's sincere rather than just sort of obvious? Data silos, as I mentioned, it's still actually very common for a lot of clients to still have the odd spreadsheet floating around. I think we all rely on them. I still do in my role. So how do we pull that and have oversight of it? Inadequate, maybe a strong word there, but reporting tools that aren't up to scratch to give you the insights you need, and maybe not having access to those reports across the organisation. And then general lack of data, which is a slightly strange point, and data management. But again, one big thing for me and Steve is that in order to understand your engagement, you need to be collecting that information. You need to understand why your members are interacting with you, and then you can build a picture from there.
Just before we move on there, Ed, the thing that joins those things together for us as technologies is integration. They're engagement problems, but it's rooted in how systems connect to each other, and that's where we're going to go with today's session.
Steve. So this is a very simple diagram, but the context here that we wanted to talk about, we mentioned integration, but engagement as a whole piece is a challenge in of itself, but as organisations and technologies expanding, we're moving into lots of different systems and lots of different data silos, different communication channels in terms of how we interact with our members. So this is just to illustrate sort of what that's now looking like today, where members interact maybe with a third-party website. That third-party website should be ideally integrated to your membership system. That then might be producing a list, like a segmented list, okay, because they've interacted with us on the website, we now want to email them, send them email communication, and that email then might be driving them to your e-learning platform. So you want to pull all that back in and then present that in a nice fancy dashboard at the back end so you can see whether that's going in the right direction for you. So inherently there's a few challenges which Steve will talk to in a bit more detail, but the opportunity here is if you do get it right, there is the opportunity to really improve that member experience, deliver that unique personalisation that we talked about, different touch points, reach certain members in the way that they want to be reached, whether that's communication channels or timings. So it is really important to try and overcome these barriers if you can, because of what's on the other side of it. So Steve, at this point, I'll hand to you and give you the mic.
Okay, so I want to take a look at some of the key points around integration and achieving effective engagement. So I'm sure most people in the room will have heard a lot about user experience in recent years. It's such an important part of the overall journey that you offer to your members. But when it comes to integration, it's key to understand that it's not just user experience that counts, and that data is absolutely key when it comes to integrating solutions together. If you give your member a compelling front-end user experience through two systems integrating, that's absolutely great, but that alone may be missing a trick, and that by using data that comes out of those journeys, you can further deepen your opportunities to engage with your membership base. And we're going for the remainder of the session, taking you on that journey of what that looks like. I think it's also key to point out that when it comes to integration, it's really key to enable the technologists that you have at your disposal to cooperate with each other. From the technologist side of the room, it's quite difficult when a requirement is maybe solutionized and it's rooted in what you're going to do, and there might be better ways of achieving that. So I just wanted to touch on a real-world example of a project that we've worked on earlier this year. And the client in question were delivering a new e-learning system to their membership base. The reason behind that project was that they'd had significant revenue problems through COVID with face-to-face events, which made up a hell of a lot of their business. So it was a diversification strategy aimed at retention, increasing their membership base, and ultimately growing their revenues, trying to protect their membership base ultimately. That project was successfully launched. They had a single sign-on that went from their website through to their e-learning platform. It used data from their CRM to drive the experience that the member had, what courses they were offered and so on. So what the member was getting was an absolutely great experience of contextualized learning by bringing together website, CRM and learning platform. But unfortunately, at this point in time, what that project didn't consider was what happens with the data that integration generates. So the member is seeing a great experience, but there was a real lost opportunity in the data that was being drawn out of that interaction. It wasn't hitting the single source of truth, the CRM, so the integration is one way. So the customer experience has been nailed, but unfortunately there's more that can be done within that project, and we hope that that customer will in time embark on that journey. But the key point and the reason that we wanted to tell that story is to emphasise just how important data is in really driving deeper engagement. It's one thing to deliver the integration, it's what can you do thereafter that is absolutely vital. So that brings me nicely on to some questions that you should ask yourselves when you begin to start integrating systems, when you go down that journey of I want to link my CRM and my website or my third-party app or whatever that may be. So first and foremost, we believe that you should ask, other than members, who else can benefit from that integration? The internal stakeholders, people that may support your organisation in your endeavours. And go and talk to those people, understand their perspective on why that integration may make use to them. Yeah, we think that's a really important way in driving out the sum total of requirements. It's really important to ask yourself, is that engagement going to enhance the engagement that you have with your members? If an integration isn't doing that, then it may not be the right integration for yourselves. It's key to look through that paradigm of engagement and what is it that we're actually trying to achieve with this integration. By doing that, you start to open out the end-to-end user journey. What are all of the touch points with the customer and how can we facilitate that through our integrations? Closely aligned to that, what other systems may be impacted by the integration? It's quite normal for people to think about CRM and website, but there will be other solutions such as email marketing tools potentially that will also play a part in that journey. So if you're integrating a new application, a new e-learning system on your website, what implications does that have for how we do our marketing and our email marketing further down the journey? And in looking at that, you start to consider that whole journey again, which is really the essence of today's session, is to look at the end-to-end journey and consider how that integration can work for you. And finally, engagement should be assessed through critical success factors. And I'd really encourage you to look again through that paradigm of engagement. How is this integration going to enable us to increase our engagement with our members? And that's not necessarily just through giving additional benefits to the member, it's then driving that conversation further in a more contextualised way thereafter. So I now wanted to come on and introduce the concept of feedback loops, and we feel that this is a really important piece with integration that enables you to start to look at the whole picture as I mentioned. So the diagram here starts at the top in our single source of truth, usually our CRM system that holds the data. Really crucial in powering integrations because you can use the data that you have in your solution to contextualize the experience that the customer has. So step number 2, integrated customer experience is what we're aiming for. That's been personalized based on preferences, routing people into a journey that makes sense to them. Systems will then generate a wealth of data as your members interact with those solutions, and it's really crucial that you capture that data through the process. If that data is not captured, whilst the member may be getting enhanced experience, there's a trick being missed there. So key as we're looking to plan and map out our integration from end to end is let's make sure we capture our data through that process and bring that back to the single source of truth, the CRM solution. So you've got that behavioural information. How are our members interacting with the integration that you've put in place? What that then enables is effective data segmentation. By growing the sum total and the breadth of the data that you have on what your members are doing through the different products and services that you offer, that drives the opportunity to better segment your membership base. And of course then the key and what we're all driving towards is that increase and improvement in member engagement. By being able to better segment data, you are then growing the opportunity to drive deeper engagement with your members. And crucially, what does that then do? It of course generates more data that you can bring back into the single source of truth to further enhance the experience that your members getting. So if your members interacting with proactive marketing activity and you know that that's taking place, that may drive what happens in their customer experience, the personalisation that they get further down the road as a result of that activity. So yeah, the takeaway there is that this is a loop, it is repeating, and that integration is crucial in unlocking that deeper engagement. So I want to return now to that real world example of the e-learning platform being integrated with website and CRM, and take a look at what happens when that loop isn't fully joined. So in that particular example, we've got our CRM solution at the top. integrated with our e-learning platform, and then we hit the cross where the integration isn't two-way. The customer's getting their new learning platform, they're getting their experience, but that data loop hasn't been closed off. So what then can't we do? We can't then analyse and report on what's happening through that tool. It may be that there's some siloed reporting that can happen elsewhere, but crucially what we're not doing is feeding the single source of truth in that scenario. So ultimately that leads to missed opportunity in data segmentation. It means that the opportunities to do more enhanced engagement, more proactive marketing to those members has ultimately been lost. Now, typically what we tend to see is that there may be tactical solutions and way of doing that in smaller handfuls, but ultimately it's not driving that same level of return on investment. The opportunities to retain and push that message with members is being lost. So then simply what happens when the loop is fully joined? By taking the information that's been generated out of the integration that the member sees, bringing that back to the single source of truth, it gives you a much richer data set that can be used to drive that engagement and to increase your chances of that integration being pushed out there in the market. So to take our example here, the e-learning solution feeds additional data, grows our data in the single source of truth, creates that enhanced segmentation opportunity, and deepens the personalisation of the message that you can drive with members, ultimately bringing them back again. We can see that you've done 5 courses in our e-learning platform last month. That's great. Why don't you try this course is ultimately what we're aiming for. But if you don't fully consider data through that journey, then that may not be the case. Okay, so I'm going to begin to wrap up the presentation now with some key takeaways. And first and foremost, it was really clear through the Digital Excellence report that those barriers to generating engagement with members was rooted in integration. So the slide that Ed showed earlier with those 6 points, it was really clear to us that the root cause there is the symptoms, but integration is the root cause. Effective engagement is crucial when it comes. Experience is crucial for engagement, but it's not everything. Consider the whole journey. What do you need internally as an organisation to get out of that integration in order to deepen the experience around the edge that the member receives? So we're aiming for 2 things here: excellence through the experience that the member gets, and then enhanced messaging through the data that can be collected. We hope that the 4 questions that we've posed today prove useful in looking beyond the member experience and understanding as a whole what your organisation can get from the technology. And I think that the point on stakeholders especially is really crucial. You tend to see perhaps IT-led decisions on how things are going to be linked together for cost purposes. But marketeers in your organisation will have a great understanding of how that data could be used, and I'm sure would agree with the missed opportunity that is exposed by not looking more widely into the end-to-end journey and what's happening there. And then finally, we hope that by paring back and looking at the feedback loop and how to keep that open, that will be of some practical use to yourselves when considering how to bring your systems together.